I wake up every morning to the sound of my Geiger counter clicking, not the frantic staccato of a radiation storm, just the steady tick-tick-tick that means I'm still breathing in a world that wants me dead. The sound used to terrify me when I first crawled out of that bombed-out subway station 3 years ago, but now it's become as familiar as a heartbeat. More reliable, actually, since my heart has skipped plenty of beats when I've stumbled into raider territory or heard the distant roar of a death claw echoing through the ruins of what used to be someone's neighborhood. My name is Marcus, though names don't mean much out here in the wasteland. What matters is whether you can find clean water, whether you can tell irradiated meat from the kind that won't make you glow in the dark, and whether you can sleep through the night without something with too many teeth deciding you look like dinner. I've been scratching out an existence in what the old road signs call the Commonwealth for longer than I care to count, and every single day is a battle between hope and desperation, between the human being I used to be and the animal I'm slowly becoming. People who lived before the bombs fell, the ones who remember electric lights that worked with the flip of a switch and water that came clean from the tap. They call us wastelanders like it's some kind of profession, like we chose this life of picking through the bones of the old world, looking for anything that might keep us alive one more day. The truth is, we're not wastelanders by choice. We're survivors, and survival in this irradiated hellscape requires a very specific set of skills that no pre-war manual could have taught you. Skills like knowing which mushroom growing in that basement will give you strength and which one will make you hallucinate giant mole rats for 3 days straight. Skills like reading the subtle differences in a raider's body language that tell you whether they're planning to trade with you or use your ribcage for target practice. The morning routine starts before dawn because dawn brings the raid roaches. These aren't the little brown insects your grandmother might have complained about finding in her kitchen. These are creatures the size of small dogs, their carapaces glowing with absorbed radiation, their mandibles sharp enough to punch through leather armor like it's made of paper. They hunt in packs, and they're attracted to the warmth of sleeping humans. I learned this lesson the hard way during my second week out here, when I woke up to find 3 of them gnawing on my boots while I slept. Now I sleep with one eye open and a pipe wrench in my hand, because out here, paranoia isn't a mental illness, it's a survival strategy. Water is the first priority every single day, before food, before shelter, before anything else that might seem important. You can survive for weeks without food if you have to, but 3 days without water in this heat, and you're nothing but dried meat for the next scavenger to stumble across. The problem is that clean water is rarer than pre-war currency, and almost every source you find has been touched by radiation. Rivers run green with runoff from bombed-out nuclear facilities. Lakes shimmer with an oily rainbow sheen that makes your skin burn just from looking at it. Even the rain, when it comes, falls in acidic drops that can eat through cloth and leave chemical burns on exposed skin. I carry 3 empty bottles with me everywhere I go, each one a potential lifeline if I can find something to fill it with. Purified water sells for more caps than most people see in a month. So, when you find a working water purifier or a settlement that has figured out how to clean their supply, you trade everything you can spare. I've seen grown men cry when they found a cache of pre-war Nuka-Cola bottles, not because of the sugar rush, but because it represents liquid that won't slowly kill them from the inside out. The radiation builds up in your system over time, and there's only so much rad away to go around. Most of us just accept that we're going to die glowing, and we hope it happens quick enough that we don't lose our minds before our bodies give out. Food is the second daily crisis, and it's almost as complicated as water. The bombs didn't just destroy the cities and turn the earth into glass in some places. They poisoned the soil, mutated the wildlife, and turned farming into a game of radioactive roulette. Anything that grows in contaminated soil absorbs that radiation and passes it along to whoever eats it. The corn might look normal, but one bite could pump enough rads into your system to make your hair fall out. The meat you scavenge from the creatures you kill might smell fresh, but it could be crawling with parasites that didn't exist before the war. Microscopic horrors that will eat you from the inside while you're still walking around. Most days, I eat whatever I can scavenge from the ruins. Pre-war packaged food, when you can find it, is like discovering treasure. Cram, Salisbury steak, fancy lads snack cakes. These become more valuable than gold because they represent nutrition that won't slowly poison you. The packaging might be 200 years old, but the preservatives they used back then were designed to last through a nuclear apocalypse. Sometimes I wonder if the people who made these products knew what was coming, if they were already planning for a world where a can of pork and beans would be worth killing for. When packaged food runs out, you learn to hunt. But hunting in the wasteland isn't like the stories your grandfather might have told about deer and rabbits. The animals out here have been changed by the radiation, twisted into forms that would have been impossible before the bombs fell. Radstags look like deer until you get close enough to see the extra legs growing out of their sides, the tumorous growths that pulse with sickly light, the eyes that track you with an intelligence that seems almost human. Mirrorlurks scuttle through the ruins like armored nightmares, their shells thick enough to stop small arms' fire, their claws capable of snapping a man's spine like a dry stick. But even the mutated animals are preferable to the choices you sometimes face when desperation reaches its absolute limit. When you're 3 days without food and you stumble across a raider camp that's been hit by something bigger and nastier than they were, you look at those bodies and you have to confront possibilities that would have been unthinkable in the old world. You face decisions that challenge everything you thought you knew about yourself, that force you to question the very nature of what it means to be human. I've seen good people, decent people, wrestle with these impossible moral calculations and never be quite the same afterward. There's something in their eyes that changes, a hollowness that wasn't there before, like they've left a piece of their soul behind in exchange for a few more days of breathing. Shelter is a luxury that most wastelanders can't afford to be picky about. You sleep where you can find a place that offers some protection from the elements and the creatures that hunt at night. An abandoned gas station with most of its roof intact. A bombed-out house where the basement is still dry. A shipping container that someone welded shut years ago and then forgot about. The key is finding somewhere that has only one entrance so you can watch for threats, and somewhere that doesn't look like it might contain anything valuable enough to attract other scavengers. I've slept in places that would have given me nightmares before the war. Morgues where the radiation has preserved the corpses so well they look like they're just taking a nap. Schoolhouses where children's drawings still hang on the walls, their bright colors now faded to sickly pastels that seem to move in the flickering light of my oil lamp. Shopping malls where the mannequins have been arranged by previous occupants into tableaux that suggest stories you don't want to think about too hard. You learn to ignore the ghosts, both real and imagined, because focusing on what was lost will drive you insane faster than the radiation will kill you. The worst part about shelter isn't the physical discomfort or even the constant fear, it's the loneliness. Humans weren't meant to live in isolation, constantly suspicious of every other person they encounter. We're social creatures, and the wasteland has turned that basic need for connection into a vulnerability that can get you killed. Trust the wrong person, and you might wake up with your throat cut and your supplies gone. But never trust anyone, and you'll slowly lose the parts of yourself that made you human in the first place. Trade is the lifeblood that keeps the wasteland from completely devouring itself, but it's also one of the most dangerous professions you can choose in this world. Every few weeks, if I'm lucky enough to be near an established settlement, I watch the merchant caravans roll through, with their Brahmin loaded down with salvage and supplies. These two-headed cattle beasts are probably the most valuable animals left alive, their mutations having made them hardier and stronger than the cattle our ancestors knew. The merchants who run these caravans are either the bravest or the most foolish people in the wasteland, because every mile of road between settlements is a potential death sentence. The caravan routes connect the scattered dots of civilization like arteries carrying blood through a dying body. From what I've heard from traders passing through, there are established paths that run between the major settlements, routes that have been carved out through trial and error, marked by the graves of those who chose the wrong path or trusted the wrong guide. The Big Circle route connects several major settlements in a loop that can take months to complete, while smaller routes service the farming communities and manufacturing towns that somehow manage to keep operating despite everything the wasteland throws at them. These routes are jealously guarded secrets, because knowing where to find clean water and safe shelter can mean the difference between a profitable journey and becoming another cautionary tale. When a caravan passes through your area, it's like Christmas morning and Judgment Day rolled into one. The arrival of traders brings news from other settlements, goods you can't produce yourself, and the promise of civilization that extends beyond your immediate struggle to survive. But it also brings attention from every raider, mutant, and desperate survivor within 100 miles. The sound of Brahmin lowing and the creak of overloaded pack frames might as well be a dinner bell for every predator in the wasteland. I've learned to hide when I hear caravans approaching, not because I don't want to trade, but because I know that somewhere behind them, drawn by the scent of easy prey, there are things that would kill me just for the boots on my feet. The merchants themselves are a special breed of survivor, part entrepreneur and part warrior. They carry more firepower than most settlement militias, and they need it. The successful caravan leaders I've met have all had the same look in their eyes, a calculating coldness that comes from having to make life and death decisions about who to trust and when to fight. They'll trade with you fairly if they think you're trustworthy, but cross them or try to shortchange them, and you'll discover that their business practices include a very permanent form of debt collection. These aren't the friendly shopkeepers of the old world. These are people who have survived by being harder and more ruthless than everything trying to kill them. The goods that flow through these trade networks tell the story of how the world has changed. Pre-war electronics and medical supplies command prices that would have seemed insane before the bombs fell, while things that used to be worthless, like scrap metal and empty bottles, have become currency. I've seen people trade working automobiles for a single stimpak, or offer months of labor in exchange for a functional water purifier. The economy operates on scarcity and desperation, where the value of something is determined not by its complexity or rarity, but by how immediately it can keep you alive. Water merchants hold a special place in this bizarre economy, their caravans protected by the implicit understanding that destroying them would doom entire communities. These traders don't just sell liquid, they sell life itself, and everyone knows it. Their bottles and barrels represent the difference between a thriving settlement and a collection of sun-bleached bones scattered around a dried well. The most successful water merchants have built their reputation not just on providing clean drinking water, but on knowing where to find it. They guard their knowledge of springs and aquifers like state secrets, because in many ways, they are. But for every merchant who makes it safely from settlement to settlement, there are dozens who don't. The wasteland is littered with the remains of caravans that made a wrong turn, trusted the wrong guide, or simply had the misfortune to be traveling when something bigger and hungrier was looking for a meal. I've stumbled across these graveyards of commerce more times than I care to count. The Brahmin bones picked clean, the trade goods scattered by scavengers, the human remains often arranged in ways that suggest their deaths were neither quick nor easy. These sites serve as permanent reminders of the risks that come with trying to maintain civilization in a world that seems determined to prevent it. The relationship between settlements and the wasteland around them is like the relationship between a campfire and the darkness beyond its light. Inside the walls, there's the illusion of safety, the pretense that human society can continue to function despite everything that's happened. People get up in the morning, tend their crops, maintain their equipment, and go to sleep at night believing that tomorrow will be much like today. It's a necessary delusion, because without it, the psychological weight of their situation would crush them completely. These communities operate on a careful balance of cooperation and suspicion. Everyone contributes what they can, whether that's labor, skills, or scavenged materials, but everyone also keeps a careful mental inventory of who owes what to whom. Resources are too precious to waste on sentimentality, and trust is a luxury that can get everyone killed if it's placed in the wrong hands. The successful settlements are those that have learned to balance their human need for community with the harsh mathematics of survival. Settlement politics are a maze of personal relationships, resource allocation, and long-held grudges that can explode into violence without warning. I've watched communities tear themselves apart over disagreements that would have seemed trivial before the war, like who gets access to the settlement's single working radio or how to divide the harvest from their mutated crops. But these aren't really arguments about radios or food. They're about power and security and the fundamental question of who gets to make decisions when those decisions can mean life or death for everyone involved. The most successful settlements are those that have found ways to specialize, to produce something that other communities need badly enough to trade for. Maybe they've mastered the art of purifying water, or figured out how to grow crops in irradiated soil, or learned to manufacture ammunition from scavenged materials. These communities become hubs in the larger trade network, destinations that merchants actively seek out rather than simply stumble across. But specialization also creates vulnerability, because it means putting all your eggs in one potentially very fragile basket. Disease is another constant companion in the wasteland, made worse by poor nutrition, contaminated water, and living conditions that would have been considered squalid before the war. The radiation has weakened everyone's immune system to some degree, making people susceptible to infections that would have been easily treatable in the old world. A simple cut can become a life-threatening wound infection if you don't have access to clean bandages and antiseptic. A stomach bug can turn into dysentery that leaves you too weak to defend yourself. Even something as basic as a tooth infection can become fatal if you can't find a dentist or the antibiotics to treat it. The psychological toll of this existence is perhaps the heaviest burden of all, living in constant fear, never knowing if today will be the day when your luck runs out, watching friends and family members die from causes that could have been prevented in the old world, slowly transforms even the most optimistic person into someone harder and colder than they ever thought they could become. You learn to accept losses that would have seemed unthinkable before the war. You develop a callousness toward death that would have horrified your pre-war self. You make moral compromises that chip away at your humanity one small piece at a time. Sleep, when it comes, is rarely restful. Your dreams are filled with the faces of people you've lost, the sounds of combat, the constant background anxiety of knowing that predators hunt at night, and that your shelter might not be as secure as you hope. Even in the relative safety of an established settlement, you never quite let your guard down completely. Part of your mind stays alert, listening for sounds that don't belong, ready to wake you instantly if danger approaches. The other humans you encounter in the wasteland fall into categories that have become as rigid as any caste system from the old world, though the divisions here are based on survival strategy rather than birth or wealth. At the bottom of this hierarchy, barely distinguishable from the feral creatures that prowl the ruins, are the raiders. These aren't the romantic bandits of pre-war movies, roaming the countryside with a code of honor and respect for their victims. These are people who have abandoned everything that made them human in exchange for a brutally simple survival strategy. Take what you need from those too weak to stop you. I've had the misfortune to encounter raider camps during my travels, and the psychological transformation these people undergo is as disturbing as any mutation the radiation could produce. They decorate their territory with the remnants of their victims, not out of some twisted artistic vision, but as a deliberate psychological tool designed to strip away their own remaining humanity. The more horrific displays they create, the easier it becomes to cross the lines that once seemed unthinkable. They paint their faces and bodies with crude designs that transform them from recognizable humans into something that resembles the monsters that hunt in the deepest parts of the wasteland. The raider lifestyle creates a feedback loop of violence that ultimately consumes everything it touches. They survive by preying on the productive settlements and trading caravans, but their very existence makes it harder for these communities to thrive, which in turn reduces the resources available for everyone, including themselves. It's a strategy that might work for a few seasons, maybe even a few years, but it's ultimately self-destructive. Raiders don't build anything, don't create anything, don't preserve anything from the old world, or contribute to building a new one. They're parasites feeding on the slowly dying corpse of civilization. What makes encountering raiders particularly dangerous isn't just their willingness to use violence, but their unpredictability. A desperate wastelander might threaten you for your supplies, but they'll usually accept a reasonable trade or retreat if you demonstrate you're too dangerous to attack. Raiders, especially those who have been using the various chemical cocktails that flood the wasteland black market, operate according to a logic that no rational person can anticipate. They might kill you for your boots one day and ignore a valuable caravan the next because they're too high to focus on anything beyond their immediate hallucinations. The drugs that raiders use aren't just recreational substances, they're psychological crutches that make their lifestyle bearable. Jet speeds up your perception of time, making the long stretches between raids feel shorter. Buff out increases your physical strength, making you more effective in combat and more confident about taking on larger targets. Psycho suppresses empathy and fear, making it easier to inflict horrific treatment on your victims without feeling the psychological backlash. But these chemicals exact a terrible price, not just on the body but on the mind. Long-term users develop a kind of cognitive damage that makes them increasingly erratic and dangerous, even to their own gang members. The raider gangs themselves operate on a principle of brutal hierarchy that makes medieval feudalism look enlightened by comparison. Leadership is determined by whoever can best combine cunning, ruthlessness, and raw physical power, but that leadership is constantly under threat from subordinates looking to move up the chain. Trust is a luxury that no raider can afford because today's ally might be tomorrow's usurper. This constant internal tension means that raider gangs rarely grow large enough to pose a serious threat to established settlements, but it also makes them incredibly volatile when encountered by lone travelers. But raiders aren't the only humans who have chosen violence as their primary survival strategy. The Wasteland is dotted with larger, more organized factions that have managed to build something resembling civilization, though their definitions of civilization might not match what the old world would have recognized. These groups represent different philosophies about how humanity should adapt to the post-nuclear world, and their conflicts shape the broader political landscape that every Wastelander must navigate. The new California Republic represents one vision of the future, an attempt to rebuild the democratic institutions and civil society that existed before the bombs fell. To a Wastelander, the NCR represents safety, order, and the promise that maybe, just maybe, the world can be made whole again. Their trade routes are protected, their settlements have clean water and medical care, and they maintain some semblance of the rule of law that prevents the strong from simply devouring the weak. But this safety comes with a price that not everyone is willing or able to pay. Living under NCR protection means accepting their authority, paying their taxes, and following their laws. For someone who has spent years making split-second decisions about life and death, submitting to bureaucratic processes and legal procedures can feel like surrendering the very independence that kept you alive. The NCR also demands a level of civic participation that requires skills many Wastelanders have never developed. Reading and writing, basic mathematics, understanding complex legal concepts, these are luxuries that survival in the Wasteland doesn't often allow time for. Caesar's Legion represents the opposite extreme, a society built on the premise that the old world's weakness led to its destruction, and that only through absolute strength and unity can humanity avoid repeating those mistakes. To the Legion, democracy is the disease that killed the old world, and only through totalitarian discipline can the new world be strong enough to survive. Their territories are safe for travelers and merchants, but that safety is purchased through the complete subordination of individual will to the collective good as defined by their leaders. From a Wastelander's perspective, Legion territory offers certain advantages that can't be ignored. Their roads are safer than anywhere else in the known world. Their laws are simple and consistently enforced, and they've eliminated the corruption and inefficiency that plague other governments. But these benefits come at a cost that many find unacceptable. The Legion's social structure is built on rigid hierarchy and the complete suppression of personal freedom, particularly for women who are treated as property rather than people. For a Wastelander who has survived by relying on their own judgment and initiative, accepting Legion citizenship means surrendering the very qualities that kept them alive. The Brotherhood of Steel represents a third approach to post-war survival, focused on preserving and controlling the advanced technology that remains from before the war. To most Wastelanders, the Brotherhood appears as mysterious figures in advanced power armor, wielding energy weapons that seem like magic compared to the improvised firearms and melee weapons that most people rely on. They claim to be protecting humanity from the dangers of unchecked technology, but their methods often seem indistinguishable from hoarding resources that could help rebuild civilization. The Brotherhood's relationship with common Wastelanders is complicated by their fundamental philosophy that most people can't be trusted with advanced technology. They see themselves as guardians, protecting humanity from itself. But this paternalistic attitude often translates into policies that keep potentially life-saving technology away from the people who need it most. A water purification system controlled by the Brotherhood might provide clean drinking water for their own members, but the settlement dying of thirst a few miles away will be told that they're not ready for such advanced equipment. But perhaps the most dangerous faction from a wastelander's perspective isn't any organized military force, but the mutated wildlife that has inherited the earth in humanity's absence. The radiation didn't just poison the land and water, it fundamentally altered the biological systems that govern life itself. The creatures that roam the wasteland represent evolution accelerated and twisted by forces that nature never intended, producing predators that are perfectly adapted to hunting in this new world. Deathclaws are perhaps the most feared predators in the wasteland, and for good reason. These creatures combine the intelligence of a primate, the strength of a rhinoceros, and the speed of a hunting cat, all wrapped in natural armor that can turn aside small arms fire. They hunt in coordinated packs, using tactics that suggest intelligence approaching human levels, and they've learned to associate certain sounds with easy prey. The growl of a struggling vehicle engine, the sound of gunfire, the cries of injured humans, all of these can draw Deathclaw attention from miles away. What makes Deathclaws particularly terrifying isn't just their physical capabilities, but their apparent malevolence. Other predators hunt for food or territory, but Deathclaws seem to kill for the simple pleasure of killing. They'll pursue prey far beyond what hunger or territorial instinct would explain, and they've been observed playing with their victims before finishing them off. Some wastelanders theorize that the radiation has damaged the parts of their brains responsible for empathy and impulse control, turning them into living embodiments of pure predatory aggression. Radscorpions represent a different kind of nightmare, creatures that combine the worst aspects of arthropod biology with radioactive enhancement. These aren't the relatively harmless desert scorpions of the old world, but monsters the size of small cars, their stingers capable of punching through steel plate, their claws sharp enough to sever limbs with a casual swipe. They hunt by burrowing through the ground, using vibrations to track their prey, then erupting from beneath the feet of unsuspecting travelers with explosive violence. The psychological impact of a radscorpion attack can't be understated. The ground beneath your feet, the one thing you thought you could count on for basic stability, suddenly becomes a source of mortal danger. Every step you take after surviving a radscorpion encounter carries the fear that the next might trigger an ambush from below. Sleep becomes nearly impossible because lying down on the ground feels like offering yourself as a target. Many wastelanders who survive radscorpion encounters develop a form of anxiety that makes it difficult for them to function in any environment where they can't see potential underground approaches. The smaller creatures are often the most insidious threats because their size makes them easy to overlook until it's too late. Radroaches the size of dogs hunting in swarms, their carapaces glowing with absorbed radiation, their mandibles dripping with toxins that can paralyze prey. Bloatflies that inject their eggs into living hosts, leaving victims to discover weeks later that they've become unwilling nurseries for the next generation of mutant predators. Mosquitoes, whose bites inject cocktails of diseases that didn't exist before the war. Microscopic plagues that can turn a minor injury into a systemic infection. By the time dusk falls, exhaustion has settled into every muscle and bone, yet sleep is never a given. The mental landscape of a wastelander is a shifting maze of fear, guilt, and fragile hope, all tangled beneath the surface of survival. Each day's trauma accumulates like radioactive dust in the lungs, unseen but steadily eroding resilience. Coping mechanisms vary from person to person, but nearly everyone clings to rituals that anchor them when the world feels like it's spinning off its axis. Some wastelanders carry small talismans, broken watch parts, salvaged from a destroyed museum, the carved handle of a toy soldier, a shard of pre-war china, painted with a child's doodles. These items serve as reminders of the world that once was, tokens of humanity that seem absurdly precious compared to brass knuckles and makeshift shotguns. I've seen hardened mercenaries stroke a chipped porcelain heart for a moment of calm before charging into a raider's stronghold. The act isn't logical, but it's a momentary bridge to sanity in a place where logic often leads to death. Other survivors rely on routines that impose a sense of order on chaos, walking the same path around a settlement to inspect defenses, checking and rechecking weapon maintenance at precisely the same hour every evening, cataloging inventory in a tattered notebook whose pages are taped and retaped until the ink is almost illegible. These rituals aren't superstitions. They're defenses against the creeping despair that threatens to paralyze anyone who stops moving long enough to notice the emptiness left by the world's collapse. Despite the brutality of everyday existence, moments of camaraderie and even levity can bloom in unlikely places. Around flickering campfires, strangers share stories stretched into tall tales, laughter ringing out like precious currency. A scrawny teenager might perform an impromptu juggling act with empty caps, drawing applause that echoes more loudly than any gunshot. These moments don't erase the horrors outside the glow of the firelight, but they remind wastelanders that life still holds fragments of wonder and connection worth fighting for. Bartering isn't limited to essentials. It extends into the realm of small luxuries that rekindle a sense of normalcy. A taster's spoon crafted from salvaged silver, a vial of pre-war perfume whose scent lingers like a ghost, a set of faded postcards from distant cities now buried under rubble. These items fetch exorbitant prices, sometimes equal to a case of ammunition or a week's worth of rations, but the act of trading for beauty, however fleeting, sustains morale. When your hands are stained with soot and your shirt smells of rot, a whiff of rosewater can transport you back to a time when mornings began with coffee and conversation. Salvaging pre-war technology is the highest stakes form of scavenging. Finding a working Pip-Boy or a functional energy weapon can elevate a wastelander from anonymous drifter to respected expert with enough status to secure safer territory and better paying jobs. But these relics are booby-trapped, derelict vaults, and corporate research labs riddled with security systems that have degraded into lethal traps. Motion sensors might trigger radioactive vents. Defense turrets operate on broken logic loops, firing at anything perceived as alive. Yet the lure of rediscovering lost knowledge drives countless scavengers to risk life and limb, hoping to reclaim even a fragment of the old world's promise. Local myths and whispered legends weave through conversations in every settlement, stories of hidden vaults filled with wonders, of cities untouched by the bombs, of cures to reverse radiation's toll. Some myths are protective parents, tell children that certain ruins are haunted by spirits to keep them from wandering off alone. Others are motivational tales, like that of a lone explorer who vanished into the glowing sea and returned with a pristine power armor frame. These legends blur reality and fantasy, providing both cautionary warnings and reasons to keep searching, keep hoping. Amid these rituals and myths, relationships form and fray with startling speed. Bonds between scavengers can be as strong as family, forged through joint gunfights and shared hallucinations. Couples exchange silent looks when danger approaches, a quick handshake that carries the weight of shared fear and affection. Yet trust is never absolute. Each alliance carries the risk that one partner will abandon or betray the other when a more lucrative opportunity arises. Love and loyalty become alliances of convenience, fragile pacts made in the shifting sands of necessity. When winter storms roll in, the brutality of the wasteland intensifies. Snowdrifts block passage, and melting ice wreaks havoc on settlement fortifications. Fires become lifelines, and wood fuel, a treasured commodity guarded as fiercely as cartridges. Frostbite and hypothermia claim victims who survive radiation only to fall to cold, silent cruelty. In these months, thirst becomes colder than flames, and the mind drifts into dreams of breathable air and running water, unchecked by Geiger counters. Burials in the wasteland are as varied as the people who perform them. Some are simple affairs, covered with stones in a remote clearing, a makeshift headstone scrawled with a name and date. Others become elaborate ceremonies, processions of survivors carrying mementos of the deceased, recounting their deeds in solemn tones. A child's grave might feature a line of worn toys laid in a row. A scientist's might be surrounded by vials of irradiated soil and shattered test tubes. These ceremonies are touching acts of defiance, declarations that lives extinguished here still matter to someone, that grief endures even when hope flickers. In every corner of the wasteland, life is an improvisation, a daily performance of resilience on a stage set by nuclear fire. Resources dwindle, threats multiply, and yet, through it all, human beings find ways to adapt, connect, and carry on. The wasteland never relents, but neither do the people who refuse to let it define them completely. Each act of survival, each small kindness, each fragment of humor and hope becomes an act of rebellion against the world's descent into ruin. At the heart of every wastelander's journey lies the search for purpose in a world that reduced most of humanity to mere survival machines. Amidst the scavenge and defend routine, individuals carve out roles that give their days meaning beyond the next ration or the next firefight. For some, it's the role of healer, the person who patches up wounds, dispenses salvaged medicines, and carries the weight of every injury they treat. These healers often tend to the sick and injured in cramped settlement clinics, lit by flickering lanterns, improvising cures from irradiated herbs and pre-war pharmaceuticals. Their hands bear the stains of antiseptic and blood, and their hearts carry the emotional toll of lives saved and lost, a burden heavier than any weapon. Others become guides and scouts, memorizing the ever-shifting topography of the wasteland to lead caravans safely between settlements. These guides develop an almost supernatural sense of direction, reading subtle changes in rock formations, wind patterns, and the behavior of local wildlife to avoid known ambush sites and radiation hotspots. A successful guide learns to interpret the land like a living map, each footprint and broken twig telling a story of who passed through and what dangers lie beyond the next ridge. Their knowledge is so prized that entire groups will pay with goods, service, and loyalty simply for their expertise, trusting them with lives and livelihoods they cannot protect themselves. Blacksmiths and tinkerers form another vital caste in settlement life. With world-altering technology reduced to fragments and schematics lost to time, these artisans keep civilization's tools alive through resourceful innovation. They repurpose scrap metal into armor plating, jury-rig pre-war firearms to fire improvised ammunition, and rewire broken electronics into functioning power sources. In workshops that look more like alchemical labs than factories, they salvage mechanical parts scavenged from wrecked factories or old military installations and reforge them into implements of both destruction and creation. Their hands are calloused, their fingers stained with grease, and their eyes trained to spot potential in the rusted debris of the old world. Storytellers and chroniclers preserve the collective memory of the wasteland's inhabitants. In a world where digital archives are long gone and literacy rates have plummeted, these individuals memorize tales, record oral histories, and paint murals in communal gathering halls to ensure that lessons from the pre-war era and the war itself aren't lost. They travel between settlements, collecting songs, poems, and first-hand accounts of pivotal events, stitching together a tapestry of shared experience. Their work is a form of resistance against erasure, a declaration that even in humanity's darkest chapter, stories remain the lifeblood of culture and identity. Children occupy a precarious niche, often shielded from the worst realities by desperate parents who cling to hope for a better future. In small enclaves, makeshift classrooms appear where a few educated wastelanders teach basics reading, arithmetic, and the rudiments of pre-war history. These lessons are fragmented, drawn from salvaged textbooks and the fading memories of instructors. For children, play often involves crude games of survival simulation, where sticks become rifles and scavenged scraps serve as play currency. Their laughter can lift the spirits of everyone around them, though it also carries a bittersweet weight, a reminder of the innocence forever lost beyond the settlement walls. No matter the role, every wastelander faces the specter of physical decline. Nutrition varies wildly. Some enjoy relatively balanced diets, thanks to greenhouse projects and pond aquaculture, while others survive on scraps and fermented mush. Vitamin deficiencies lead to brittle bones and weakened immune systems. Untreated infections become chronic conditions. Dental decay forces the use of painful, makeshift extractions. The passage of time leaves its mark more quickly here, each year carved into the flesh by lines of fatigue and scars that never fully heal. Acceptance of bodily vulnerability becomes its own kind of wisdom, teaching wastelanders to cherish fleeting health and adapt when broken parts refuse to mend. Spiritual beliefs flourish alongside practical survival tactics born from the need to find comfort in uncertainty. Some settle into new religions built around the ruins, cults that worship the irradiated landscape as a reborn earth or venerate pre-war technology as the divine relics of a lost age. Others cling to fragments of old-world faiths, reciting prayers in chapels rebuilt from collapsed cathedrals, or creating shrines from the wreckage of Protestant churches, synagogues, or mosques. These faiths provide rituals for birth and death, offer moral guidelines in a lawless land, and channel communal fear into collective hope. Whether believers pray to alien gods or the memory of humanity's more enlightened past, spiritual practice becomes a lifeline against despair. Mental health struggles simmer beneath the surface of every settlement. Post-traumatic stress manifests in jumpy reactions to sudden noises, nightmares that replay the flash of nuclear fire and the screams of the dying, and hypervigilance so intense it triggers exhaustion. Self-medication through homemade hooch or barter-rigged chem dispensaries offers temporary relief but accelerates mental deterioration. Support networks are informal. A group therapy circle around a dying fire, a quiet conversation with a fellow survivor who's seen the same horrors, or a solitary vigil at a makeshift memorial. These rituals recognize that healing from trauma requires more than patched flesh. It demands communal acknowledgement of pain and shared resolve to keep moving forward. Pilgrimages have emerged as pilgrimage does, following rumors of places untouched by radiation or of vaults untouched by time. Entire settlements have emptied when a charismatic leader claims knowledge of a utopia beyond the wastes, sparking caravans of hopeful families. Many of these journeys end in disappointment or disaster. The promised land, a mirage or a trap. Yet, the idea of possibility propels wastelanders onward. The act of pilgrimage transforms despair into action, offering a narrative of progress rather than a resigned acceptance of decay. When spring rains return, they wash away more than dust and grime. They reveal new blooms, mutated but hardy wildflowers in shades the old world never knew. Gardeners in community greenhouses cultivate irradiated plants into edible strains, crossbreeding mutated seeds with heirloom varieties to produce resilient crops. These green oases are fragile, prone to contamination, yet they stand as testaments to human ingenuity and the will to foster life in even the harshest of conditions. Harvest festivals centered on these plants become rare celebrations, moments when the wasteland feels more like a world worth preserving than a tomb worth fleeing. Despite the hardships, long-term relationships form, rooted in shared history and mutual dependency. Friendships forged in battle evolve into family bonds, trading partners become confidants, and couples marry under arches of rusted metal and tattered banners. These relationships provide stability in an unstable world, forming micro-communities within the larger tapestry of chaos. They remind wastelanders that survival isn't just about the physical act of staying alive. It's also about forging connections that give life meaning. Yet, change is the only constant. Settlements rise and fall, trade routes shift, mutated storms reshape the landscape, and new threats emerge as old ones are vanquished. No wastelander can ever be truly comfortable because comfort invites complacency, and complacency is a death sentence. Life in the wasteland is a perpetual dance with impermanence, each step measured against the ticking of a Geiger counter and the whisper of wind through shattered buildings. The essence of existence in the wasteland is uncertainty. Each decision, from choosing which ruined highway to traverse to selecting which supplies to carry, is a calculation weighed between risk and reward. Yet even the most careful planning can be undone by sudden shifts, an unexpected radiation spike, a settlement's collapse under siege, or the betrayal of someone you considered an ally. Adaptability becomes the defining trait of those who endure, a blend of instinct, learned skill, and relentless determination. One of the most precarious challenges is navigating radiation zones. These pockets of intense fallout emerge near irradiated facilities, downwind of reactor meltdowns, or in the glowing heart of areas scarred by nuclear blasts. Radiation moves like a silent predator, invisible and lethal, its levels fluctuating with the weather and even the time of day. A wastelander must read subtle environmental clues, glowing fungi, warped metal, purple haze, to judge whether a scavenging expedition is worth the exposure. Geiger counters are indispensable companions, clicking faster as you inch closer to the danger, but their readings lag reality by seconds you might not have. Misjudge the tick-tick-tick, and you risk acute sickness that leaves you feverish, disoriented, and dangerously vulnerable in a world without medical safety nets. Medicinal resources are seldom found in abundance. Pre-war antibiotics are rare treasures, rationed sparingly by healers who know that microbial resistance and expired potency can render them useless. Instead, wastelanders learn to harness irradiated flora and fungi in their makeshift treatments. Mutant mushrooms, when prepared correctly, can slow the progression of radiation poisoning or boost the immune response. But the line between cure and poison is razor thin. A single misstep in dosage or preparation can turn an ally into a toxin. Herbal medicine in the wasteland is both art and gamble, a craft practiced by those with steady hands and nerves of steel. For more severe cases, a few caravans specialize in medical smuggling, risking route detours through Legion or Raider territory to deliver salvaged experimental treatments. Their shipments might include radiation-absorbing chelators, pre-war chemotherapy agents, or prototypes of advanced power armor that administer automated medical injections. These caravans charge exorbitant prices, trading treatment courses for whole months of labor or multiple barrels of purified water. Even so, their existence is a lifeline for desperate wastelanders who would otherwise succumb to slow, agonizing decline. Social dynamics in the wasteland extend beyond settlements and caravans to roamers, travelers, who reject the idea of permanence, pressing ever onward toward unknown horizons. These wanderers tend to develop reputations that precede them, rumors of treasure maps, secret vault entrances, or alliances with distant enclaves. Some roamers strike deals. Guide me to your settlement. in exchange for protection, or share news of uncharted ruins in return for safe passage through my territory. Trust is fraught in these encounters, yet the information and companionship roamers offer can mean the difference between thriving and dying alone in the wastes. Wastelanders also form informal alliances when larger threats emerge. A superstorm, mutated by radiation, might descend on multiple settlements, its winds carrying corrosive dust and lethal electricity. In such moments, rival communities send messengers, bearing offers of mutual aid, workers to reinforce walls, scouts to identify safe pathways, and gunslingers to patrol flanks. These alliances are temporary pacts, forged by necessity, dissolving as the storm clears, often leaving behind fragile threads of cooperation that might rekindle in future crises. Children who grow up in the wasteland face a different coming of age than those of any previous generation. Their rites of passage include scrounging clean water from an abandoned well without lethal consequences, sneaking supplies through raider-controlled areas to aid elders, and enduring the rigors of radiation tolerance training in controlled environments. Some communities establish youth militias where adolescents learn marksmanship, basic first aid, and stealth techniques. Graduating from these programs isn't just a badge of honor, it's a foundational credential that influences marriage prospects, trade agreements, and leadership roles later in life. Childhood, for these young wastelanders, is compressed into lessons of survival that blur the line between adolescence and adulthood. Artifacts of the old world retain mystical power in wasteland culture. Pre-war holotapes record fragments of propaganda and news broadcasts that fascinate listeners curious about an era of stability and prosperity. Personal logs from vault dwellers offer glimpses into lives both eerily similar and shockingly alien to a current populace hardened by scarcity. Some wastelanders collect these artifacts obsessively, believing that they hold clues to vault locations, pre-war military caches, or advanced technology blueprints. Others use holotapes and vintage recordings at settlement gatherings, projecting them onto scavenged screens as communal experiences that bridge generations separated by nuclear catastrophe. Music, too, serves as a tenuous but vital thread connecting wastelanders to a lost past. Pre-war vinyl records and even battered jukeboxes filled with 1,950 seconds rock and roll are prized possessions, their melodies imbuing flickering candlelight with nostalgia and defiance. Yet the static, the crackles, and the occasional warped note from damaged tracks remind listeners that perfection has been irrevocably broken. Survivors dance around campfires to tunes that once inspired road trips and romantic interludes, repurposing them as celebrations of life persisting despite apocalypse. Technological reclamation is an area of fierce competition and cooperation in equal measure. Robotics experts attempt to reactivate pre-war service droids, repurposing their programming for protection or labor. Some succeed in reanimating rusty protectrons, only to watch them malfunction and attack indiscriminately. More cautious engineers salvage circuit boards and power cells from derelict robots, transplanting components into custom-made turrets that guard settlement perimeters. Workshops hum with powered exoskeleton prototypes designed to help wastelanders lift heavier loads or fire energy weapons with minimal recoil. These prototypes are experimental and often dangerous, but they represent aspirations of reclaiming a past dominated by machines and progress. Psychological resilience remains the invisible armor that defines the most enduring wastelanders. Patience cultivated through endless days of waiting for trade deliveries, optimism fueled by whispers of hidden vaults, and humor sharpened by absurdity all contribute to a mindset capable of facing daily horrors. Some settlements institute resilience training, group workshops that teach mindfulness techniques, share trauma narratives, and practice breathing exercises to manage panic attacks triggered by sudden gunfire or unseen threats. These programs aren't widespread, but where they exist, they mark a growing awareness that mental health is as critical as physical health for long-term survival. As the sun sets and the world plunges into darkness, wastelanders face one final test each day, confronting their own mortality. The night is a canvas for fear, its every shadow a potential threat. The stars overhead, once symbols of wonder, now feel like indifferent witnesses to humanity's downfall. Some people speak aloud to ward off loneliness, reciting old prayers or singing hymns they barely remember. Others sharpen weapons by lamplight, preparing for nightmares they know will visit them in their dreams. Sleep, when it finally comes, is both a relief and a surrender. You drift into unconsciousness with the knowledge that each dawn is a new gamble, that yesterday's victories offer no guarantees tomorrow. Every wastelander's story, however unique, converges on the same realization. Life in the remnants of civilization is both fragile and tenacious. Walking through the skeletons of skyscrapers and crumbling suburbs, you feel the weight of history beneath your boots, the world that once was, and the world that endures because of people who refuse to give in to despair. The final chapter of this journey is not a neat resolution, but an ongoing commitment to resilience, adaptation, and the quiet hope that tomorrow might be gentler than today. By now, you have seen firsthand the layers of challenge that define a wastelander's existence, battling the elements, forging uneasy alliances, navigating moral gray zones, and confronting horrors, both visible and hidden. But perhaps the most poignant truth lies in the small acts that affirm our shared humanity. A barter for a child's drawing on scavenged parchment, a scavenger pausing mid-expedition to share fresh berries discovered in a hidden grove, a chorus of voices raised in song when the storm passes. These moments, fleeting as they are, reveal why people stay, why they choose to live in a world that has broken them again and again. Imagine standing at dawn on a ragged hill, overlooking a settlement. The first light paints the ruins in dusty pink and orange hues, offering a brief illusion of serenity. You tighten the straps on your makeshift armor, check the cache of supplies at your belt, and take a deep breath of cold morning air that, for a moment, feels clean and hopeful. In that instant, you carry the combined weight of every loss and every victory you've experienced. You remember childhood tales of endless horizons and skies unscarred by fallout, and you realize that despite everything, you are still free to walk toward those horizons, however distant they may be. The end of one day is never the end of the story. It's merely a pause before the next cycle begins. You carry with you the knowledge that each decision matters, the choice to help or ignore a stranded traveler, the choice to invest time in teaching children how to read or saving those hours for scavenging, the choice to preserve your humanity in a world that rewards cruelty. These choices define who we are when the world has stripped away everything else. As settlements rebuild and fall, as trade routes shift and new threats emerge, the wasteland teaches you that stability is a mirage. But within that instability lies opportunity. A broken radio tower might be restored to connect distant communities. A mutated grove could be cultivated into a unique crop. A forgotten vault could reveal technologies to uplift thousands. Every ruin holds potential, waiting for those bold enough to unearth it. The true measure of a wastelander is not their ability to survive one day, but their willingness to envision a future and take steps, however small, toward realizing it. In the evenings, you return to the settlement, greeted by the glow of lanterns and the murmur of conversations. You share stories of the day's journey, the landmarks you passed, the dangers you evaded, the rare treasures you discovered. Children gather at your feet, their eyes wide with wonder at tales of death claws and hidden vaults. Elders nod in approval as you recount how you outwitted a raider patrol. Traders offer compliments on your haul. In these exchanges, You reclaim fragments of community and belonging that the bombs once threatened to obliterate. When you lay down to rest, you drift into sleep with the soft lullaby of distant generators and hushed voices echoing through the empty streets. Your dreams blend reality with memory. You stroll through pre-war fields of golden wheat, then find yourself sprinting across irradiated marshes under a sky streaked with unnatural auroras. You wake with a start, the line between vision and reality blurred, and realize that both have taught you something vital. To navigate uncertainty, you must bend without breaking, to carry memory and hope in equal measure. The Wasteland's final lesson is acceptance without surrender. You learn to accept the constant presence of danger, radiation, and loss, without surrendering the belief that life is worth the struggle. You find meaning in small victories, a child's laughter, a successful scavenging run, the survival of your settlement through a harsh storm. These victories accumulate, creating a mosaic of resilience that stands against the darkness. Life for a common wastelander in Fallout is not a romantic epic or a tragic downfall. It's a series of choices, big and small, each shaping a narrative of endurance. From the first hesitant steps beyond the vault or shelter to the hardened vigilance of a seasoned traveler, the journey is defined by the determination to keep walking, keep building, keep hoping. In a world remade by nuclear fire, every sunrise is a gift, every shared meal a triumph, and every compassionate act a declaration that humanity endures. And so, the story doesn't end, it continues, carried forward by each individual who takes a step, offers a hand, or shares a tale under the flickering sky. In the ashes of the old world, wastelanders keep the flame of civilization alive, one heartbeat at a time. That is what life is truly like for a common wastelander in Fallout, a testament to human resilience, a celebration of small mercies, and a relentless pursuit of hope in a world that demands courage at every turn.